Hello everybody, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Danica Warburton, the Principal of Investability. Thank you very much for joining the webinar with Alvo Minerals today. Unfortunately, we won't be listing post this webinar, but all good things come to those who wait. And we are obviously very excited to be hitting the bourse. And personally, we've just loved working with Alvo Minerals and the team. I can't wait for Rob to run us through Alvo's exceptional project. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Alvo's MD, Rob Smakman, live from Brazil, to run us through the presentation, which will be followed by a Q&A. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Danica. Hello, everyone. It is Brazil over here at the moment, and it's about 9 o'clock at night. I'm sitting in a hotel breakfast area, and really pleased to be sitting here and talking to you all. The first thing I'd like to say is that all of the information that we're going to present in this presentation today is actually based from the prospectus, so there's nothing new in here that we have to worry about in terms of disclosures. And in terms of the ASX, we're obviously seeking to have some clarification about why we've been asked to tap the brakes. We think it's only going to be a few days. We do hope it's not going to be a Dan Andrews few days, but being a Melbourneian, I think we'll be able to survive a few extra days before we list. So, yeah, without any further ado, let's go ahead. I guess we'll start with a bit of an introduction. The Palmer project is something that Bo and I identified probably about 5 or 6 years ago when it was first presented by the Brazilian Mines Department at a conference. And we saw it, and I guess it just stuck in the back of the brain until they finally turned around and decided to take it to auction. It's a project that was obviously discovered in the 1970s, and they spent a lot of time exploring and looking for base metals in the region, but then have left the project idle for a long time. So I'm just going to go through the presentation. There's obviously the normal disclaimers. I guess the first thing we'll start off is a few highlights. It's in the central part of Brazil. There is a JORC inferred mineral resource estimate on the project that we put together during the prospectus process of 4.6 million tonnes at about 1% copper, 3.9% zinc, some lead, 20 grams of silver, and we think there'll be some gold associated with it as well. It's near surface. This project has been drilled from surface, and it was discovered through geologists walking on the ground and actually knocking the rocks that stuck out of the ground. And that's really important for the second part of the story, so I'll leave that for the moment. It has been idle for over 30 years. For the first time, we've been actually able to collect a whole package, over 500 square kilometres of contiguous ground, that we think is all prospective for VMS style mineralisation. So VMS style is a really well-known style around the world. They tend to form in clusters, so you may have multiple projects within the same district, and that's why we think this particular project's got some real legs to go forward. After they'd done the initial drilling work, there was a company that came through and flew a big VTEM survey across it. And that VTEM survey has been a really key part of our exploration strategy so far, in that information can really highlight where the buried other targets could be. On top of that, there's a whole bunch of soils and stream sampling samples across the entire belt. So there's a whole different set of different layers of information that we've been able to put together, collect the ground, and now we're ready to get going. And so we are really eager to get listed, and we're really excited to have the money to go and start drilling. As a last little highlight point on that particular slide, we have picked up another project to the south, which is a nickel copper PGE layered. It's an ultramafic ultramafic layered intrusion, similar in some ways to what we've seen recently that Chalice has discovered in Perth. So we think that's an exciting one. It's not granted as yet, but we'll be pushing forward on that one. I guess the first slide is a little bit about how advanced these discoveries are. The C3 asset had some exceptional drill holes. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the drill core, which assayed 2.6% copper, 10% zinc, some lead, some silver, and a little bit of gold as well in that particular intercept. Obviously 20 metres is a nice thick slice. As I said, it is really shallow, so these do come out and stick out of the ground. I think it's only been drilled down to around about 250 metres from surface. Over 32,000 metres of diamond drilling has been put into this project over the last, during the 70s and 80s. Preliminary test work's been done, that looks good. And as I said earlier, it does tend to form in clusters. So we think this is only the first cab off the rank, so to speak. If you look at it from a geological perspective, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving around there. Nod, Danica, if you can. Yep, she's nodding, good. So it's right in the middle of Brazil. I've got to tell you, it's quite hot here at the moment. It'd be at least 35 degrees every day. It's quite hot and dry, and then the storms come and it rinses everything away, but then it gets hot the next day. So as you can see here, there's 5 different deposits or prospects, advanced prospects that were discovered by the CPRM. C2 is not part of the package that we own. That is something that we may be able to acquire in the future. But the 4 main targets are C1, 2, 3, C1, 3, 4 and 5, all located within about 15 kilometres of each other. The city that we are operating out of, or the town I should say, sits in the middle here. It's called Palmeirópolis. It's the name that the project originally was called, but it's a bit of a mouthful. So we've shortened the name to the Palma project. In terms of what we paid for it, most of the payments are back-ended. So once we've actually confirmed that the drilling on site is what we expect, then we will pay the final amounts, and we'll own 100% of the project. So we think it's a really good deal in terms of the auction process. A bit about the history. I mentioned it's been discovered in the 70s. They did most of their work in the 80s, so between 79 and 93, including the drilling and the met test work. The Japanese government got involved for a few years, a group called JOCMEG. They did some mapping, some soils, some ground geophysics, and a half a dozen drill holes as well. And one of the keys was the 2008 survey that was flown by a group called Fulton and Tim. They're a major explorer here in Brazil, and they flew a helimag B-10 survey across the area, but they could never get access to the key parts of the ground that was part of the CPRM. So we think by accessing that data and then putting it over the known deposits that were in the CPRM package, we've got a really good start on where we can go in terms of exploration. We bid on the project first in 2019, in October, finally signed the deal in February 2020. Of course, I think 3 weeks later, COVID hit, and I guess that's sent our world into a little bit of a certain period of uncertainty, shall we say. And now that we think that Brazil and Australia and the rest of the world is emerging, it's the time's right to list, and yeah, we're really looking forward to getting on the ground and getting drilling and getting operating over here. It's a fabulous location. I mean, apart from the heat, which I've already complained about once, it sits right in the middle of Brazil. The capital city is called Brasilia. It's about a 6-hour drive north. It's bitumen highways the whole way. It has a railway nearby. It's got hydroelectric schemes surrounding the project. The town of Palmeirópolis has about 10,000 people here. There's a few hotels. So we're busy setting up an office here. It has got lots of advantages from a logistical perspective and infrastructure. And of course, Brazil's such a big economy that it has got its own smelters within the country. So in the future, if we do manage to turn this into a mine, then we'll have a ready access to the markets and be able to start producing metal. This is the resource. There's two targets, 2 prospects that we've defined a resource on, C1 and C3. We've used a net smelter return cutoff on there of $60 US a tonne. And as you can see, the overall grade's about 1% copper, just under 4% zinc, 0.4 lead, and about 20 grams per tonne silver. So quite high grade overall. You'll notice there's no gold being delineated there, and that's because it wasn't sampled regularly throughout the whole process. And the photo of me there on the right-hand side is actually in the drill core from the CPRM, and we're actually going through and resampling that right now to see how much gold is associated with, if any, with the C1 and C3 prospects. But it's suffice to say that this style of mineralisation generally has some gold associated with it. So we're quite excited to see what that will be. Hopefully we'll have an idea fairly soon. We'll touch on the C3 and the C1 prospect. C3 first, it's higher grade and slightly larger. It extends for about 600 metres north-south. It has some exceptional grades in the drilling, as you can see in the cross section or the long section that we see there on the left-hand side. But on the bottom, I'll draw your attention to some of the gold results that were assayed back in the 80s, which we're hopefully going to redo now. I mean, you can see there's some pretty impressive grades there as an accessory mineral to those upper grades. One of the real things that I wanted to talk about here is that the drill lines are 100 metres apart. So what that means is that's a really long distance between drill lines to estimate a resource anything beyond inferred level. So one of our jobs here and now, it's going to be our first job, will be to drill some holes in between these lines to be able to upgrade the resource to indicated or better, should the results reflect what we've done in the past and certainly hang together like we've interpreted it today. In terms of the cross section, you can do see how they basically go to the surface. There's a very thin oxide skin at the top. It's near vertical, and the drilling that we've done and we've interpreted so far, we haven't done that, we've reinterpreted, really hangs together in a single ore body across that 600-700 metres of strike length. Certainly open down dip, certainly open down plunge and along strike, and we think there's some really opportunity to look for parallel zones as well. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done here at C3, and this is where we'll be starting our exploration. C1, again, it was drilled by the CPRM. The drill lines, again, on the left-hand side here, they're 100 metres apart, way too far for anything beyond inferred resource, but a real opportunity for us to infill the resources and upgrade them to indicated or better status. We also think there's a real opportunity here to expand our resources, because we can see a plunge orientation in the mapping. We can see part of the ore body itself is actually folded, and again, we think there's an opportunity to upgrade as well as expand here. Again, the extremities have been tested for gold, but everything in between hasn't. So we see occasional results from gold that are quite tantalising, but there is a lot more work to be done. So looking forward to getting into C1 as well. We'll start that project early in the new year. A couple of drill sections here. On the left-hand side is the northern zone. You can see it's a much more regular shaped ore body. The one on the right is a cross-section from the southern zone. You can see it's been folded on the contact of a felsic and a mafic volcanic unit. And what we're seeing on those folds is we're seeing a thickening, and we're seeing some better grades as well. So that's actually quite exciting for us. And we think there might be a plunge orientation with that, which we can chase and look for expanding the resources as well. In terms of exploration targets, this is where I guess my blood really gets pumping as an exploration geo. This is something that we've put this package together and managed to pull a whole bunch of different information together as well. So on the left-hand side is one of the V10 interpretation levels. It's the Channel 20 survey, and basically showing there's a bunch of more conductive units in the surface, but some of those we can see through that information, and we think some of those are buried conductors that could be additional ore bodies. So they're the ones that we need to go and test. They're the green dots. In addition to that, we're looking at every piece of information that we've collected over the last year or so. We've put into different maps and put together, I guess, a favourability map that allows us to go and then chase targets and put them through a stringent and one after the other exploration program. So that's going to be a really exciting part. I do want to talk quickly about a couple of targets. In the middle diagram here, you can see the C1 project. Those black dots are all drill holes. Thanks, Monia. To the north, you can see a conductive target which has been identified by the VTEM. It had 2 drill holes to the southern edge, which did hit disseminated mineralisation, but nothing drilled inside this target, which just means it's buried slightly below the surface. We think the top of the anomaly is about 50 metres. That's a target that we should go up and start drilling really quickly early in the new year. So I'm pretty excited about JS43 or C1 extension. And the other one is C3 West. So again, the black dots represent drill holes that were done by the CPRM. You can see a small slither of red there, which is the outcropping Gossan, with a small conductor to the northern end. And then over here to the west, you can see this really large elongate and plunging conductor, which we're not really sure what it is. So that's something that's going to need a little bit more work. We're going to go and put a ground EM survey across it, a fixed loop, to see if that we can verify the veracity of this particular prospect. And if it works, then we'll put some drill holes into it and see what we get. But there's a whole bunch of these targets that I'm really excited about going to have a look at. I'm going to skip over T1. The last little area that I wanted to talk about quickly was an area down to the south. It's called the Cunnabarabra mafic ultramafic belt. Basically, I guess it's a teardrop-shaped belt, and you can see the dark green and lighter green. But in between those two colours, there's a purple layer, and that's a really important ultramafic layer that potentially is showing some anomalism in the samples that we've got, the very few samples that we've got for nickel, gold, copper, and PGEs. So we think that's a pretty interesting target. This is the northern extension of 2 of the more famous nickel areas in Brazil. So further to the south, about 40 kilometres, is a place called Landia, which direct translation is nickel land, where Anglo-American have been operating for the last 50 years on a big nickel laterite mine. We're not looking for nickel laterite, but we still think this is a pretty prospective area for nickel, cobalt, copper, even PGEs and gold. So that's a pretty exciting project. It's not quite granted yet. We are pushing that with the mines department. We've got a good relationship with them, and we think we'll be able to get them granted and get on the ground and just do some really early stage, some soils, some mapping. And if it does start to come together, then we'll get in there and do some drilling on it as well in the new year. That's the board. Graham is the chairman. He can't be with us today. He's obviously he's on a holiday down south. He's a lawyer based in Perth. We've known each other for a long time. He's a very good friend of Bo's. Bo's a geologist as well. He's on the call, so if you've got any other questions for him directly. But Bo's spent over 9 years here as the chief consultant for coffee. So and I've got to tell you, I'm really pleased to be back after being locked down in Melbourne for a long time. But very happy to be back in Brazil, and we think we've got a real tiger by the tail. So exciting. So this is the capital structure of the company. This is a pro forma, assuming the list, hopefully in the next few days. Board of management have got a good chunk, over 20%. We've got 3 larger institutions on board already, resource capital funds out of the States, Sprott and Paragon, so pretty good register so far. There's another 11 smaller domestic and international institutions that make up another 22%. So really strong and tight register to date. We think it's got a really reasonable enterprise value, and we plan to explore lean and mean. We've just we've signed our first contract for a drill rig and an office space. That's the first office space we've got. The rest in Australia, we don't have any office in Melbourne in Australia, so yeah, pretty excited about that. We do plan to be drilling by the end of this month, subject to a few ducks falling in a row, not the least of which is getting listed. But we've got our licence applications are underway. We expect them to have them granted shortly. We've expect to be signing up local access with the farm, with the landowners. The drill rig, we expect that to land on time. So there's a few moving parts that need to come together, but we're pretty confident that will work. And then, of course, over the next 12 months, we'll be drilling, we'll be updating our resource, we'll be doing some early metallurgical work and scoping work, and a whole bunch of other ground-based exploration. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to throw back to Danica, and hopefully she's got some questions from the audience.
Thanks very much, Rob. That was fantastic. And I'm so glad the internet held in there. So really well done. We are going to open it up now to a Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A feature down the bottom of your screen. We do have a few already that were sent through an email, so I'll get to those and a couple in the Q&A as well. The first one, and you have provided some commentary on this in the presentation already, was around the historical results at C3. Do you see potential to increase the grade of the inferred resource through infill drilling?
Yeah, look, and we do know that the spacing between those drill holes there is really broad. Improving 20 metres at 2.5% copper, 10% zinc is going to be a tough ask, but we'll certainly have a crack. I'm really excited about what the potential of gold could be out there, whether or not I think that'll help improve grade overall. But yeah, it's really going to be let's go and put some holes in and see what we can get. But we don't think it's going to go down that way.
Okay. There's a question around why hasn't it been drilled in the last 30 years? And Mick has asked on that, why couldn't the 2008 Explorer get access to the ground?
So that's two questions. And the first reason that the CPRM haven't done any extra work is because I think they pretty much stopped any drilling work and actual project development work back in the early 90s overall. So they've existed, they still exist now. They have 300 geologists. Their real focus is on mapping and upscaling the overall understanding of geology in Brazil. And they've got 50 projects which they've kept under their wing for that long. They haven't had any work on. 2008, I don't know why Votorantim team didn't get access to the ground. They flew the entire belt, I think, as part of an exploration program, hoping they could get access, and never did. It was a joint venture between a Canadian junior and a company called Votorantim.
Is there potential for there to be a bigger discovery than the deposits currently found?
We hope so. And I guess if you look on a global scale, these district scale VMS prospects can have tens of millions of tonnes of resources in them. And now you're frozen, and I think my internet's unstable. I'm going to turn my video off again. So yeah, these types of camps around the world can be up to tens of millions of tonnes in resources. So there is a good chance that something within the belt exceeds what we've already got, well exceeds. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Okay. And how much drilling do you need to do to turn around the C1 and C3 inferred resources into measured and indicated resources?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Leanne. I can see there on the right-hand side. About 7,000 metres will get us to indicated on C3, and about 10,000 metres will get us to indicated on C1. Obviously, that depends a little bit upon how the results go and if it all hangs together as we've interpreted it. But that's a moving feast. We do hope that we'll be able to drill a lot more than that and expand those resources beyond what we've already got.
Okay, and a question that got emailed through was on the funding. How long will 10 million last, and where will it get the Palmer project to after this expenditure?
Yeah, so I've got programmed 20,000 metres over the next 18 months. There will be a lot of dependent upon results as we go. My budget puts us through 2.5 years of expenditure before we start to have to tap resources. Unless we accelerate, and if we're getting really good results, we'll do that.
Okay. And what's your exploration target for the next 24 months?
My aspirational target is to turn into 10 million tonnes, indicated at a similar grade. I think with that kind of inventory, we'll have something that'll be we could comfortably put a scoping study on. Yeah.
Okay, great. One from Reese here. How's the building out of the on-ground team going?
Yeah, hi Reese. It's going really well. I've got a couple of the team here with me at the moment. I'm going to turn my video on first, and then I'm going to. I want to introduce you to Julia Liz, Exploration Manager, and Louise Anonia, who's a lawyer and I guess country manager.
Good morning for everyone.
So these two guys are the core of the team. I've worked with Nonya for a long time, since my early days at Crusader on and off, and I've only got to know Julio just recently, but he's got a really long career in exploration with companies like Codelco, Sumitomo, Anglo American, Barrick, but also some junior companies as well. Really focused around base metals. He's actually worked in this district before on VMS prospects, and yeah, I'm really pleased to have him on board because he's been fantastic so far. We've today turned up our first field technician, which is a really cool guy from one of the local towns. We hired a office manager today as well, and so tomorrow we're going to walk around town and buy some furniture because we don't have any chairs or desks yet. And we've got 2 more field techs starting, a geologist starting next week. Yeah, so Reese, the team's going well. Team building's going really well.
Great. Thanks for introducing us to the team. Love to see
Yeah, thanks,
guys. So there's a question coming through on the risks side of things, which we will touch on. PUM project, is it in a mining friendly state, or will there be a problem obtaining exploration or mining permits? Is there anything else we should consider?
Yeah, so the state's the newest state in Brazil. It's called Tocantins. It's right in the middle of the country, as I sort of showed before. It's not historically a mining state. The state just to the south is. I think that's a real advantage because, first of all, mining is federal based, so the state only makes a difference when it comes to environmental licensing. In my mind, the smaller the state, the bigger fish you are in that pond, and that means you can get access to the governments quite easily. So yeah, so far it's been pretty good.
Got a bit of background noise there, bit going on. What about COVID? What's the COVID situation like over there? How are you navigating the pandemic?
Yeah, I looked up some stats today because I thought that question might come up. I have to say their vaccination rollout's been going really well. They're currently at 70% of the entire population at plus 70%, and 44% are at the second jab. Pfizer, AstraZeneca are the two main vaccinations that they're using, and it seems to be that it's rolling out pretty well. We spoke to him yesterday. He said there's 2 current cases in town of 10,000 people. Whether those numbers are right or not, but we're pretty comfortable with that. What else? People are taking it really seriously. Everyone that we talk to and see on the streets are wearing masks. There is social distancing going, but most businesses are reopening. So yeah, it's going okay.
Yeah, and I saw on some of the site photos that you've been sending through, everyone's wearing masks as well. So see if I can't get some of those up in the chat. Probably can't because I can't do 2 things at once, but I might send them around in the follow-up email. So Tim has asked a question. G'day, Rob. Given Brazil has 80 to 90% of its power grid from renewable sources, what's the potential for Alvo to produce green zinc / copper, etc.?
Hey Tim, how you going, mate? Yeah, look, obviously really good, and I think I touched on it in my presentation. We are surrounded by hydroelectric schemes. In fact, there's 4 within 50 kilometres of the town, so we could even tap directly into a hydro plant. And obviously, if we get down to that point, we will have one of the lowest footprints going around. Apart from that, we take it really seriously. Historically, I've been involved with companies that have the IFC or as a shareholder, and that just means that we follow the equator principles and the IFC guidelines. So it's really important to me, and it's really important to the board that we go ahead as sustainably as we can. So I don't really know if that means it's green zinc or green copper, but certainly, it's in our minds, and in the future that will be part of it.
On other news flow, what does it look like for Alvo post-listing? What have you got coming up?
Yeah, so the two main things that are coming up is that we'll be starting drilling hopefully by the end of this month. Now, clearly, with all the delays going on, and it is diamond drilling, so it has taken a bit longer to prep, but we expect to be drilling, and access to the drilling is really, really good. So we can hope that we'll have results by Christmas, fingers crossed. But apart from that, we've got hundreds of samples going into the lab from the reassaying of the old drilling. So that's underway at the moment, that sampling, and we'll definitely have those results back by the end of the year. So they're two really important parts of the equation. Apart from that, kicking off all the exploration that we've got going on. So there'll be a fair bit of news flow coming.
Very exciting. So thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks Rob for being up so late.
Thanks, guys.
I'm so glad the internet stayed on for us.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, it was pretty good.
And
thanks so much for the help, Danica. It's been great.
We'll catch everyone soon when we start trading on ASX.